Overall, police say some 120 people face pending charges. Sharif and Nicole join me now here in St. Paul. Welcome to Democracy Now! I don't think we expected to be in jail last night, but Nicole, let's start with you. That was very dramatic footage. Explain what happened. This was actually just outside SPNN, St. Paul Neighborhood Network Public Access TV offices here in Jackson and 7th in downtown St. Paul.
Well, basically, Sharif and I had been out that morning filming the anti-war protest, which was mostly peaceful. We were out for 3 hours, 4 hours filming that. Eventually, we left the main protest. We went back to the office. We were going to digitize our tapes. And then from the offices, which, like you said, are here in SPNN, we saw that there was some activity down on the street. So we grabbed our camera. Basically, what we saw then was just police in riot gear moving down the street. We didn't see any crowds. So I grabbed my camera and I ran out the door. And just basically followed the police. I saw that they were preparing to put on tear gas masks, and I was just filming them. Shortly after, Sharif came down, and he brought my press pass down and put that around my neck. So we followed the crowd for a few blocks, and very quickly we saw that there were police coming from all directions. There were police on horseback, there were police on bicycles, and there were police officers in riot gear. So that moment that you saw, that was after we had moved into an intersection where police were coming from 3 different directions. They were telling us to move back, and that's what we were trying to do. That's what I was trying to do in the video. I was trying to move back, but I was in a parking lot, and I wasn't able to get back. And
the car was behind you?
Cars were behind me. We were in a parking lot, and I was telling them that I'm press. Please, don't, let me pass. But I couldn't turn around. And I tried to move in between between 2 cars, and instead of letting me pass and following the crowd, they instead came right after me and slammed me into the car. At which point, I think my camera came back and hit me in the face, and 2 cops were also behind me, and they pushed me through that row of cars into the next area of the parking lot and slammed me to the ground and said, "Get your face on the ground, get your face on the ground." And I was, at that point,
so you were on your stomach, on your face on the ground?
I was on my stomach on the ground. And one of the officers, I think he was trying to grab me. He was trying to drag me. He was grabbing my leg. And another officer put his boot on my back and was pressing me to the ground.
And he was pulling you with your leg, the other officer?
He was trying to pull me. They weren't very well coordinated, I guess, because one of them was, pushing me to the ground with his foot, and I was stomped on, so I had to stay where I was, but the other one was pulling on my leg.
So if he was dragging you and they told you to put your face, we heard him say, put your face in the ground, right, then they would drag your face along the ground.
I guess so. I was trying to keep my face up because I kept trying to tell them I'm press and show them my pass, and I had my camera in my hand, and I was trying to protect that.
We heard you shouting, press, press.
Right. So I guess they were, trying to drag me and get me into this area, and I was surrounded by maybe 5 or 6 cops at that point. And eventually I just had to, acquiesce, and I just lay there and put my head on the ground, and I could see that my nose was bleeding onto the pavement.
Were there medics around?
Shortly thereafter, a medic did come over, and he asked me if my teeth were hurting, what had happened, and I was like, you saw what happened, these police officers knocked me down. And he, wiped my face with a towel, but, I kept just saying, I'm with the press, I'm with Democracy Now! I want to be released.
Had they handcuffed you by now?
Yes, they had put me in those plastic cuffs, and my hands were behind my back, and my camera was, 2 feet away from my face, lying on the ground. And I think shortly thereafter, one officer came over and picked up the camera and took out the battery. And at that point, I was worried that they were going to take my tape. But I don't think, they didn't, because now we have the tape, but he did take the battery out, I guess, so the camera wouldn't be recording.
Mm-hmm. Sharif, where were you when all of this was happening?
Well, I was with Nicole the entire time while we were following the protesters and the cops in the streets. And Nicole gave a very good description of what happened, but basically it seemed like the police were, they formed a perpendicular line and were pushing back most of the protesters, and on a perpendicular street were doing the same. And basically corralled everyone on that parking lot, which was on Jackson between 7th and 9th. And once they had most people in the parking lot, they just rushed it.
So it was like a pincer move where they came in from all directions. You couldn't escape.
And
you asked one of the police officers, by the way, Nicole, how can you get out?
Right.
And what did he say?
he didn't respond to me. I just said, "How can I get out?" Because I was moving backwards into those cars, and I said, you know, where am I supposed to go? And at that point, they just, you know, totally rushed me and knocked me down.
And I mean, this isn't like a conversation you're having with just a person. This is a cop in full riot gear. These are pretty big guys generally, and they're screaming at you to move. And so what happened was they rushed the parking lot. Everyone in the parking lot was subject to arrest. They just rushed in, and Nicole very bravely was there filming the protesters, and you see that she gets tackled down very violently. I was just on the outskirts of that, and I saw what had happened. So I ran in. I was holding a microphone, so I held it, you know, above my head with my left hand high to pose no threat. I had a Democracy Now! Press pass, as well as an RNC press pass, which gave me access to inside the convention, which is a hard one to get. You know, you have to get vetted through your social security number to get that one. So it's a higher degree press pass as well. Anyway, I was holding my Democracy Now! One and screaming, "She's press, she's my coworker, let her go." And then when I was doing that, two or three police officers tackled me. They threw me very violently against a wall. Then they threw me to the ground. I was kicked in the chest several times. A police officer ground his knee into my back, and I was handcuffed with plastic handcuffs. And I was also the entire time telling them I'm media, I'm press, I'm credentialed, I'm an accredited journalist. But there was that didn't seem to matter at all. I looked over, saw Nicole on the floor, on her stomach with her hands cuffed behind her back. I yelled over to her, and I saw her face was completely bloodied. This entire time I kept telling them to let us go. There was a photographer right next to me who was also taken down pretty violently. He was screaming, he was press as well, he had credentials. He kept saying he was a photographer for the New York Post. And quite funnily, he said, for Christ's sake, it's a Republican paper. But that didn't seem to matter. And then that was it. You know, we slowly got processed. We all got pushed over to the other wall opposite. They lined us up. I kept asking for them to bring Nicole to me, but they refused. And then I looked up and I saw you walking towards me in handcuffs. So.
I had gotten the call. I had just been interviewing someone in the Alaska delegation on the floor of the convention at the Xcel Energy Center, and making my way over to Minnesota, where we are now, the Minnesota delegation. And as I was talking to someone, I got the call from Mike Burke, from Mike, who was also on the scene, said, "I believe that Sharif and Nicole have just been arrested."